Hello, everyone. I'm Craig Stuart Adams from W Real Estate, and today I have the honor to have a short interview with Les Himes from Phillips and Associates. And Les is an insurance broker. He does a lot of work with residential and commercial transactions. And Les and I have been talking about some of our needs, as of course, anybody in the real estate business or anyone that owns real estate in the state of California is realizing there's some challenges getting insurance. Certain types of insurance are very difficult to get right now. So I just want to go over some basic knowledge points that Les had presented to me. And we're going to go through this together. And, hopefully there'll be a few insights shared with you that'll help you be a little bit more prepared for yourself and also for your clients. So with that, I'd like to introduce Les Himes.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So Les, I'm looking at your list. And of course, one of the challenges we have is the fire insurance in the state of California because of so many things that we've had happen in the last 3 to 5 years. And the very first one says location of the structure, and is it within a mile of grassland or brush? Are you finding that to be an issue even in urban areas, or is that mostly rural?
No, it's everywhere. In fact, I had a opportunity on a medical building in Thousand Oaks, and I'm down in the south part of the state. If people from that area, it was in the northwest corner of where the 23 and the 101 come together. So this building had fire breaks that were 10 lanes wide to its immediate east and 10 lanes wide to its immediate south. And it's in the middle of Thousand Oaks near a hospital. It was turned down by 3 major carriers because of brush. So the issue here and the mile is not necessarily a magic thing, but it's something to just be aware of, because I guarantee if you showed 100 people a satellite picture where this building was, none of them would have said that's a brush strip. Yes, there is grassland across the freeway to the south of it, but it's so well protected. But it's hard line situation. There's not a lot of negotiating with this. I actually had my rep with one of the companies went to bat for me. And
Wow.
he sent me back an email and said, "Hey, Les, I tried your argument with the freeways. I agree, but they won't buy it." So if I can backtrack one thing on this list, on the beginning and end of this list, I'm going to say something that's key because it actually happened to me last week. All of these issues can be surmounted. Well, almost all of these issues can be surmounted in one way or another, but what it costs is time, and a lot of time. The industry is underwriting things at a pace, many more things that would have gone through a front-end engine and been issuable are not. Everything's being hand reviewed. So to anybody that's in a real estate transaction, the insurance, the tip of the tail is wagging the dog. You've got to get whatever broker you're using in there at the very beginning. Because, a few years ago, you call me on Monday, you need a certificate on Wednesday, we do some work, and bang, I got an accord out to you on Wednesday, and you get it to the loan company and everything's closed. And that is just not today. Everything that you've learned about timing and ease of getting that accord, that certificate of insurance, is completely gone. So you've got to get out into it as quickly as you can. I even tell some of the brokers that I work with, do a brush check if it is in that kind of an area before you even make an offer.
I know with
it's
us,
that bad in some areas.
We actually, as soon as before we even go into escrow, sometimes we start that process. Of course,
Yes.
Escrow is key, but it takes a lot more time. And even, for example, where we live, we're 2 blocks away from a fire station, and the insurer required us to cut back on a lot of trees in our neighborhood. And they're beautiful, gorgeous trees that we've never had problems with, but this was part of the new requirements.
Yes.
So, I
Yes.
think a lot of people are finding it's business for the arborists. I have to say, they're probably happy.
Oh yeah, that's another one of the words that wasn't on this list, but that's definitely a 4-letter word in California, and that's overhang.
Oh yeah.
Those older areas where there be up north or down here in the south, if you've got those old growth beautiful trees that are hanging over the house,
Yeah.
they're going to have to come back, or in some places, some carriers will allow you to trim them up So there's 6 feet between the bottom of the branches and the roof, but most are saying you cannot have any overhang. And some are even getting a little edgy about, the classic hedge against the house that's been trimmed and manicured. I had a small house that was beautifully done, and the guy was very proud of it. And I said, well, sorry about that, but you're gonna have to cut that back. You're gonna have to trim the trees, the old growth tree. And of course, especially here in the South with the heat, that old growth tree that led shade in the afternoon and is a money saver because it's saving on AC in some cases. So, it's a push and pull, but the one thing that I'll go back to again is things are just not negotiable. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, this is how it is. If you don't like it, pick up and go on down the street. The problem is there's nobody on down the street in some of these cases. You're kind of stuck where you are. So yeah, but overhang is definitely, and trees are a big issue.
What about the age of the roof? Because that was another thing that came up recently. You and I were looking at something, and it looked like the recommendation was to stay with the existing carrier
Yes.
because a new carrier would require a roof inspection. And from what we could tell, that we didn't know for sure. That it looked like
Right.
they are really crunching down on that and using satellite imagery. They're also looking at, they want to see actual receipts of when the last roof inspection,
Yes.
not a roof inspection, but
Yes.
a roof installation took place. And a lot of
Yeah.
times we don't have that. Or what if the homeowner didn't pull a permit? How serious is that?
It's very serious. One of the major carriers, one of the major personal lines carriers that's still writing in California. And nobody is writing in an unfettered sense. Even the ones that are writing are have drawn much tighter their underwriting. They have a drop dead rule at 25 years, unless it's tile. But any other material, it doesn't matter. I literally have a situation that was 25 years and 2 months. And I called the underwriter just because, and they said no. And you looked at the picture of the roof, it was a tab shingle, it was a composition roof, but it was in good shape. The inspection said it was in good shape, but the line with that carrier is drawn at 25, again, with the exception of tile. But for most roofing, it's 25 years. And it's a drop dead date. It's as this one, which I literally had last week again, um, was absolute 25 years. This was 25 years, 2 months. It was done in January. It turned 25 in January, so it's now an adult, but it's not insurable. And that's a major issue. That's not with all carriers, although all carriers, I am also fighting right now with another carrier over a section of flat roof on a home that was redone in August of 2019. And they take satellite pictures. They have some sort of artificial intelligence that examines the picture, and then they grade out the roof. And the problem is it's as much magic to me as it is to the guy that's sitting there at his desk looking at the picture. All he knows is it has a color spectrum of how much water is pooled on the roof. And if it goes beyond a certain point, then it gets kicked out. And I was corresponding with somebody on that this morning because the satellite picture was between two waves of a massive storm. The roof it was in August of 2019. You look at the overall picture, there's not a single portion of any flat roof in the entire area that doesn't come up on their scale. It was kind of a magenta moving towards red. And then it's like, okay, this is a 5-year-old roof. What do we have to do to fix it? And there was some discussion there as to whether, and I'm still trying to get clarification as to whether an inspection by a licensed roofer will be sufficient. So I'm still fighting with that one. And I mean, that's absurd. That was 5 years old. So it's a very, very restrictive environment. All of these issues, again, I'll go back to my time thing. If you're in an escrow and you're setting an escrow and you're trying to kill it, you're trying to get it knocked out, that's that time factor again, because it's not a matter of, oh yeah, look, the roof was done in 2019. A few years ago, the roof was done in 2019. Check off the accord. I probably wouldn't even have sent the permits. and everybody would have been happy. But now it's not a question, the Accord, most of you have probably heard of, it's a standard, industry standard form for application. And if they're not using that, if they're using their own form, it's still got the same 4 questions that we're going to talk about, one of which is in roof. In the past, you put a year in there, depending upon what it was, there may or not have been proof required, but the proof was that the insured signed off on the bottom and warranted the fact that they stated the roof was done in 2015, for example. And that was sufficient. Today, no. Almost all the carriers that are writing, they want some substantiation, not just your signature. They want either a permit or the invoice from the roofer, and in this case, roofer could be plumber when we talk about plumbing, from the contractor that did the work, that says we did a full roof replacement on August 1st of 2019. And that has to be submitted. And all of those updates generally need to be proved. So unless the house is within the last 15, 20-year period, you're going to have to have proof of those upgrades. And again, the house could be 25 years old. Some of this is kind of working at cross purposes, because like that roof on the house I talked about, there was no reason to replace that roof yet other than the insurance driven reason. So I don't know, and it's just not negotiable.
I'm sorry, we've been talking a little bit about, the age of the roof, of course, the brush around trees and around the property. We didn't really mention the age, but I guess what if a property, you mentioned a 25-year-old property, what about a 50-year-old property? Or something that's like around here, we'll have some properties that are 80, 100 years old.
Sure.
Are they specially targeted? Are those homeowners in a difficult position more so than a more modern
Yes,
building?
it depends again, and much of this underwriting guidelines are carrier by carrier.
Okay.
Some people will write those and some people won't. But you still, especially with those properties, you fall back into the roof when it was done, and it's going to fall under those same age rules that we talked about, unless it's tile. And those homes, if we're going to go back even 60, 50, 60, let alone 100 years, were probably done with galvanized pipe, which is going to have to be proof that that was replaced, probably with copper at some point, or if done later, there's some code approved plastic type pipes, PEX is one, that are approved to carry potable water. But they're really looking, if it was really done right now, they may have used plastic in a moderate tract type home. But it's a special plastic. It's not PVC. It's rated to carry potable water. So on that older house, yes, it has to have probably been upgraded to copper at some point, which it probably was, because I don't know how. I actually lived in the Bay Area many years ago and have relatives up there, but I know in Southern California, it has to have been done because the water quality is such that after that amount of time, the galvanized would basically have choked off the water supply anyway.
I see.
So we go back to the truth. We go back to the proof thing. Yeah, here's the copper, but when was it done? The copper is not so much of an issue regarding that, because photos can be taken of that. And proof can be rendered with the photos. The other issue with that older home is the electrical panel.
Oh yeah.
If you're going to go back 100 years, and of course it was at some point, but that was probably done on a fuse system, not breakers. It could have been aluminum wire in the house, which is generally a no-no under most carrier skates, and it could have been knob and tube wiring, which probably isn't going to fly with most carriers anymore, because all of those things are fire hazards, and this is all about fire. So the electrical has been upgraded at some point, and now we get the other thing in, and this is an open bag because it depends on the carrier again. But there are a number of panels, especially, and some of them were very heavily used in the 50s and 60s in regular home construction, that have proven over time to create fires. Doesn't mean your panel's going to burst into flames this afternoon, but statistically, over the long haul, these panels have become suspect, and there are a number of carriers, Federal Pacific, Stab Lok, Zinsco, and some other panels, depending. Again, some of this will be fine with one carrier. You go to the next carrier, the Zinsco panels and the Federal Pacific panel are generally trouble wherever you go. And they just, it's an underwriting. If this is there, it's a no. It's a disqualified risk, and they won't take it at all. So the electrical panels there. The last item of our list is the either heating or HVAC system, and they want to know when that's been replaced, and again, proof or replaced or a major service. I think what you're seeing in the carriers as both the Bay Area and Southern California age is I had somebody call me and say, well, you know, I need a new roof. And I said, well, that's all well and good, but your policy, yes, and you can buy home maintenance policies, but your typical homeowner's policy is not a maintenance policy. And of course, as soon as I say that, somebody said, well, what about, you know, breakdown coverage? Yes, there is some things that you can purchase, but it's not intended to replace your roof that's 50 years old that you never replaced. It's not a wear out policy. It's a sudden failure of some system, including the roof, that's caused by a covered event. It's caused by fire, could be wind, depending upon the language of the policy or something. It's not, your homeowner's policy is not intended to replace your plumbing because the galvanized got so choked off that it wouldn't put water through it anymore. That's not the point of insurance, of homeowners insurance. And the carriers were, especially down here and up there as well, as the area ages, are getting more and more of those type claims. And so they're just not going to expose themselves to it. One of our biggest claims down here, of course, are water claims, because they can get very nasty. And so that's where the influence on the plumbing and maintenance of plumbing. Almost every carrier has their own little bywords for pride of ownership. And one of the things on inspection is the home maintained? I mean, there's always some place, but again, it's a question of time, and it's a question of desirability of the carrier and their claims handling and money as well. So, and the other thing, since we brought that up, that we're seeing, you're going to see much more of, and this may occur after the fact, is almost always going to occur after the fact, are home inspections. Mm-hmm. You're going to get at minimum a drive-by. And if it's a higher end home and the carriers have their own threshold, they may require an interior inspection. What they're doing there is many of them are done by video, where they will kind of lead you through on your cell phone and you'll take pictures of the house. That's kind of a fallout from the COVID days, because people didn't want people in their homes. In the old days, they would come in and in the past, walk through the home and take pictures and notes and value the home as well. Now it's typically around the perimeter. They'll take pictures and they'll ask you for pictures of the interior, but expect some type of inspection. And again, that may generate a ding list. They may come back and say, we've inspected the home, you need to address this, and this, or we will non-renew you. And then that becomes an issue over whether those are valid issues or not. But inspect an inspection like that. You know, they may look at the satellite and say the trees are okay, and then the person does a drive-by and they take other pictures, and from a ground level they see where the trees are, and then they may send a letter to the insured and say, well, you need to trim those trees back, you have X amount of time, or if you don't trim them, we're going to issue a notice of non-renewal. So everything is much more under a microscope. There's a lot more commercially available data in terms of what's online, satellite pictures, a number of these AI, which is, you know, in some senses is a big deal, and sometimes it's being now used as any program that runs by an algorithm is AI. So some of this stuff's pretty sophisticated and some of it's pretty normal, but expect the process to be slow. Expect it to be looked at on the back end, even after the policy's been issued. Again, when you're speaking with your clients and you're taking someone out, like you said, for the arborist, mm-hmm. You know, when you're taking someone out to look at a home and it's this beautiful home, you know, and it's got these old growth, beautiful trees that are hanging over the roof. You've almost, to keep you looking good in the eyes of your clients. Unfortunately, you probably need to say to the client, look, you know, those trees are magnificent. And that tree's probably 100 years old, but the insurance carrier is probably going to make you trim that tree back. And I have it just as a aside, I know somebody that calls me that lives in Pasadena, and they have a situation because they have a deal where you can't cut a tree down. So they have, you know, old Pasadena, all these old growth trees. And this one fellow, in fact, you know him, Craig, I'm not going to bring his name up, but he was fighting the city to be able to trim this pine tree that had started to lean. And couldn't get it done. And this has been a couple of years ago, some of the severe storms, and the tree fell. The tree was going down. They couldn't get it cut down. The only thing that was a saving grace, it was like a giant hand took the tree and put it down between the two houses. It hit the roofs a little bit, not much damage. I mean, it was this enormous tree that could have done severe damage, but it was like a lumberjack cut it and laid it between the two houses, and just Mother Nature just had a smile on her face that day and decided not
Wow.
to put it down right where it was. But so then you get into that. Well, the city won't let me cut it. The insurer says, I don't care. And they go back to the city and says, the insurer says, I got to cut this tree down. And the city says, I don't care.
That's a
So it's
problem.
kind of this, it's really kind of an Alice in Wonderland time. I mean, I make light of it because I'll be crying later. But it's really a tough and absurd time. And I would even plead, you know, obviously there's a lot of people are going to look at this and they're using their own brokers. Cut your broker a little bit of slack. That phone call they didn't return is because they can't get their call returned. There's another one of the carriers that's still writing. You know, in the past, I could run it all down and bind it for you in a couple hours. And depending on what it is, it pops up this big red banner on the top that says, and it's not all that deeply in. It says, this risk requires mandatory underwriting. It will take 15 business days. It also goes on to say, do not call us. That will not accelerate the process. And then it gives you a ding list that says, okay, 123 Elm Street, we need this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
And we'll talk to you in 15 days. And they're good to their word. I have one, and I called, and the person said to me, well, yeah, this is no joke. It was last Thursday. Yes, you're right. It's 15 calendar days, but it's not 15 working days till Monday. Call us back on Monday.
This is
I mean,
not
this
this is not a short-term thing. I mean, this is going to be an
no.
ongoing, you know, underwriting challenge. You said something really interesting, I thought, earlier, and that was that you've got, you know, let's say you're a homeowner and you own a policy and everything's great. You've been paying, everything seems terrific. But I'm gathering from what you're saying is that the carrier at any given time can come back to you and say, look, you know, we've got X, Y, and Z issues. You're going to have to correct that, or we're not going to renew your policy. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. And the other thing
Yeah.
too is, I mean, if you saw the news last week, State Farm, who's already withdrawn, came out and put a thing out to their agents. It took a couple of days to hit the media, but it hit the media over the weekend. 42,000 apartment policies in the state of California and 30,000 home policies in the state of California. State Farm is not going to renew.
Wow.
So
that's a big
what I'm
challenge.
telling people too is, even if you're in your home, I suggest, you know, we talked about that file that's got proof of the last re-roof, proof of the plumbing replacement, proof of electrical service, and proof of HVAC. And people should be advised to have that documentary evidence in their personal file, because there's 30,000 homeowners in California that are going to get that letter 60 days out, and they may send it out before that. As those policies come to expire over the next 12 months, they're no longer going to be with State Farm. And when they go wherever they go, even though they've been with whatever carrier, because State Farm's not the only one that's non-renewing, when that carrier non-renews, now they got to go find someplace else to go. And that carrier is most likely going to require proof of those 4 items and many other things, but that's the first 4 to get in the door.
The other part of this too, I mean, there's so many moving parts here, but you know, let's just say you're a homeowner. You've got you've been happily paying your fire insurance. Everything seems good. You haven't had any notice. Nothing's come in. But you know, you have this over your head that potentially they're going to do this, and it's not going to go away. So we really have to be proactive in keeping our maintenance up on our properties and making improvements. But the other challenge too is that, you know, you've got a mortgage. Most people have a mortgage. And in the mortgage, part of that mortgage agreement is that you have to have insurance. So now you got a real problem, because does that mean the lender is going to call the loan if you can't find a carrier for your fire insurance? Or you're going to be forced to pay some exorbitant amount of money every month, you know, or every year to, you know, cover that nut?
It's possible. I mean, that has happened in the past. It may be with commercial properties. What typically they'll do is many of the banks have what's called a list policy. So they've got a policy that's probably written, if it's a big bank, it's probably written for all 50 states. And they will add you on for fire. But the issue there is you don't have any say who it is. It's their list carrier or program carrier. And it's going to be extremely expensive because they don't care. All they're interested in is insuring their mortgage. If your house burns down, they want to get paid. They don't really care
Yeah.
about your liability or your personal stuff or what it costs you to be out of the house till it gets rebuilt. That policy is going to cover the dwelling and nothing else. But it is
Mhm.
conceivable that it can get to the point where you can get that nastygram from the mortgage company, bank, whatever it may be, that's holding the paper on the loan and saying you're in violation of the loan. What are you going to do about it?
Wow.
Absolutely,
So
it's a possibility.
yeah, so I mean, for those of us that work in the sector, I mean, we need to really be, you know, instructing our clients and, you know, people in our sphere that, hey, these are some realities, and just be aware of them. Hey, what about, I know we've been kind of focused mostly on individual mortgages, but in right now, the demographics in America, people are getting older. There's a big push for ADU, the accessory dwelling units that are additional units that are placed in the back of the property or sometimes in the property. But you know, it does, all of a sudden now you've got a situation where you have tenants. You may be living in the property and you may have tenants, or maybe you've made a transition where you have a home that you're going to rent out to somebody.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because your regular home policy is not the same thing as a policy that covers for tenants. What are the differences?
No, what you're going to get there is what's called a lesser's risk only.
Uh,
And what it is basically, to kind of use a meat axe, it's your homeowner's policy with there's a little bit in there, but most of the personal stuff cut out of it. So what it's going to do is it's going to be a fire policy. It's going to be a liability policy. The thing I would say there is make sure in your loss of use, there's a loss of
mhm.
use item in there, maybe slightly different, but loss of use, make sure that you figure in the rents on the property for 24 months if you can get them. Having lived through a major fire myself and through an earthquake, you know, if you have an area wide issue, it's going to take 2 years at least to get that house rebuilt. We had a restaurant that burned completely. That was over 2 years, and because of permitting and this and that and all that stuff. So you need to make sure on that lesser's risk that you have sufficient in there to cover your loss of rents. And then there's some issues on the tag end of that to make sure there's some added coverage there, but that's for another day. But yes, your homeowner's policy needs to be replaced with a lesser's risk, or uh, a landlord policy, sometimes it's called. And it does not do all the things that a homeowner's does, but it does more in some ways. And you definitely got a liability issue there. So you probably want to raise the liability because you have things going on there that are outside of your control.
Well, let me just summarize what we've gone over so far. We talked a little
Sure.
bit about the age of the property, where it's located at. We talked about the age of the roof and just what's expected from the roof. We've talked about the electrical system, the electrical panels. We talked about plumbing and upgrades, And we also talked about the service upgrades to the
Right.
heating and ventilation system and AC system. And then, of
Right.
course, we've kind of wrapped things up with a little bit about tenants and how that would
Yeah.
affect a change in the policy. So, I mean, those are, great bullet points. And I thank you so much for sharing all this information and knowledge with us. I think it's fantastic. I've learned so
Great.
much just by listening to everything you've had to say, Les. Can you just take a moment and tell our listeners a little bit about you and how to contact you? And I will also put in the notes of the video your contact information and a short list of the 7 items we covered today.
Okay. Sure. My name's Les Symes. I'm a principal with Phillip and Associates Insurance Services. We are in Chatsworth, California, but we have clients throughout the state. I used to live up in the Bay Area when I was a kid, lived in Fremont and Concord, had a lot of family up there. His sister lived down in Los Gatos, so I'm familiar with that area. Most of those people, unfortunately, it was aunts and uncles have either passed or moved out of the area, but I am pretty familiar with the risks in that area and the geography of it. We're a boutique agency. We're about 70% commercial lines, 30% personal lines. Pretty much do most all types of insurances other than construction because of the way we're set up. It's very hands-on. So we don't do artisan construction, but pretty much anything that you can think of other than your airplane. We won't do that either because that's a niche. Workers' comp, general liability on that side, professional liability, commercial auto, and then over on the personal line side, earthquake, homeowners, auto, boats, RVs, personal umbrella. Pretty much if you've got it, we can insure it. Hopefully, if we can get to a carrier, I shouldn't say that anymore. It's one thing I'll tell a tale on myself. I've always my whole life I've considered myself a problem solver, and I've also been that guy in the room that when the feathers hit the fan, everybody turns and looks at Himes and says, "Okay, he'll come up with an idea." And I got to tell you, this environment that we're in, and I'm going to punch this up at the end for the brokers that are looking at this because I can't talk about time enough. It is extremely difficult right now. It's very frustrating because the solutions are few and far between. And the other tidbit I'll throw out is if you have a renewal, take it. Unless it is so exorbitant that you cannot afford it, there's no sense, there's very little sense in wasting your time and some brokers trying to do anything other than look at the coverages and make sure you're adequately covered because there's no magic out there. There's no anybody that comes in and says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to save you, the Saturday commercial. I'm going to save you $500 on your auto." It ain't happening. It probably never was anyway, but it's really not happening these days. The process is slow. The process is tight. It's frustrating, and it's slower than slow. So get into the process early. Get your paperwork together. Your broker doesn't care when you did your roof last, to be quite honest. He would rather be able to go back to the old days and write 2015 on the paperwork and be moving. He's not asking you that stuff to make you angry. He's asking it because he's in the middle and some underwriters on his case to provide the proof. So it's a new day. And I don't know if ever, I don't think it'll ever go back because of all the mechanized and online ways of gathering data, but it's a completely new day. And people out there in the real estate world, I mean, they're already seeing it, but they really need to acknowledge it and understand that timing is now much more important than it ever was in the past.
Well, like every challenge, there's an opportunity, and I think for us,
Absolutely.
it's just being to, just showcase our level of professionalism by, telling the people in our lives and our clients, just giving them a heads up so that, you can stay on top of this and be aware of it, and also have good connections. And, for example, for those of you that need, great advice on insurance, you can give Les Himes a call anytime. And if you need some great advice on real estate, you can give me, Craig Stuart Adams, a call anytime. And between the two of us, we'll help you navigate through those particular areas of expertise. So I'd like to thank everyone today for watching. I hope you got a lot out of it. And please check the notes below. I'll put a short list in the notes for the video and also Les's contact information. And thanks again, Les. It was a great interview this morning.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.